What's good, people? Welcome back to another video on that FPL. I'm Jack. Today I'm joined by Rod, and we are going to be giving you our Premier League Team of the Season / end of season awards, I guess. How you doing anyway, Rod?
Not too bad, mate. It's been obviously we're coming to the end of the season, last game week on the weekend. It's been quite a long one, so just kind of good to round it up on what we think, really.
Yeah, mate. It's been a really good season, in my opinion. Despite the fact my team's done absolute dog shit, but I mean, you can't have everything. It's been intense towards the end. Tomorrow, well, on I guess Thursday, we'll be doing our penultimate episode of the FPL show where we talk about FPL and the Premier League in general. And what a crazy start to this game week it's been. Arsenal has seemingly blown the top four race in 2 games, and it's going to be crazy, Rob. But today we're here to talk about our team of the season and our awards we're going to be giving out. So let's get straight to it, son. All right.
Do it, mate.
All right, Rob. We're going to start off with you, and we're going to start with your flop of the season, Jack Grealish. Talk me through it.
Obviously, this might come across as I'm being a bit of Villa fan, but for me, from the off, I thought it was a bizarre signing. I mean, we'll take the 100 million. I think we've invested it. I'd say we've invested it okay. On paper, we invested it quite well. But Grealish is a player who doesn't fit City's system. He likes to drive with the ball, dribble it, and his ball retention's amazing. But City, the way they play is one touch, two touch at a maximum. You haven't got the freedom to just drive with it, and often he's quite isolated out wide. And I mean, he's played 26 games. I think he has had a lot of appearances off the bench, and 3 goals, 3 assists is a poor return on their investment. I understand that Pep players they always take at least a year to settle in, but it's going to be hard to nurture him into the player Pep wants him to be because for the majority of his career, virtually all of his career, he's been taught to dribble with it, keep the ball and drive up the pitch with it. And 100 million, I think it's a waste, and he just doesn't fit the system. Obviously, Pep's one of the best managers in the world, if not the best. So if he is to nurture him, he's probably the best one to do it. But I think this year he's been poor, and I think every City fan will agree with me. There's obviously going to be arguments that he needs at least another season, etc. But I mean, when you spend 100 million, you expect instant impact. In 26 games, 6 goal contributions in a City team that score goals for fun, I think it's poor.
Yeah, mate. For me, I understand where you're coming from with it being a bizarre transfer, but I think with the form that Grealish was showing, yes, the fee is astronomical. Is that the word? But yeah, for me, I actually thought he would do a bit better at City, and for me, I'm really surprised that it's taken him so long to kind of bed into the team, and he still really hasn't done it yet. I thought he would have had a consistent run in the starting 11 by now, but he hasn't. Yeah, for me, definitely up there as one of the flops of the season. But my flop of the season's got to be Romelu Lukaku, mate. And for me, 8 goal contributions in 25 games, probably not as bad as Grealish, but for me, the outburst from him coming out and saying that, he was missing Milan and stuff like that so early on in the year and so early on into his return to Chelsea was just crazy. Do I think it's all Lukaku's fault that he's flopped? I don't. He has been terrible at certain times of the season. He seems to be turning it on a bit late now in the year, but, for me, I think Tuchel's really used him wrong. I think Tuchel's not got the best out of Werner as well, who's shown a new lease of life under Hansi Flick in the German national team and has been looking good. And for me, I think Rom is being mishandled at Chelsea. He's just not been up to the standards we really expected, and for the fee they paid, I was expecting the Chelsea title challenge this season and, for Romelu Lukaku to be up there for the Golden Boot, but he's way off.
I mean, to be fair, I can see where you're coming from because I think we said in one of our first couple of shows that I think it was especially against Arsenal where he showed just how good he can be with his hold-up play, with his link-up play. And he's a type of striker which is obviously different to Werner, different to Havertz, where you put the ball into him, he'll hold it up, or you cross it, etc. And they haven't really played to his strengths. And obviously, 25 games, 8 goals for 100 million. You're expecting at least 13, 14 goals, and he has turned it on recently, but you can't, in the middle of the season, you can't come out and do an interview with the Italian press saying how much you miss Milan, and I think he's brought it upon himself. But at the same time, I do put some responsibility at Tuchel's feet, because when you bring in a player like this, you essentially have to mould your attacking output around him. You know he's not going to run in behind. He's going to hold the ball up. He's going to put headers in. But I think, yeah, his attacking output has been a bit poor. And it's going to be interesting. Will he be there next year?
Yeah.
God knows.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to come back with you. It's like, is he going to be there next year? And, is Tuchel going to be able to work with him? Because I think on both ends there's a real lack of kind of respect, I guess you could say. I think Lukaku, the way he went out around, talking out about, wanting to go back to Milan. And to be honest, I think the way Tuchel's kind of handled it hasn't been the best either. I think, to kind of completely blank him in a way. Yes, he's upset you, but for me, the quality of player that is in there, it could have been something like Chelsea really could have needed this season. And I think, from the start of the season, Chelsea we thought was going to be up there, but really disappointed. We'll move on now, Rod, to our signing of the season. Why don't you start us off with yours?
So Luis Diaz, for me, I think he's been incredible. I understand he's only coming in January. However, I think everyone can see the impact he has, and he obviously doesn't speak the English language yet. But the way he's just got this innate relationship with his teammates, that he's an incredible player, and his dribbling is absolutely fantastic, and his delivery, his technical ability, I think it's second to none. And as a Liverpool fans should be incredibly excited. And obviously 12 games, 7 attacking contributions. I think it's impressive, and this is half a season, let alone what he can do over a whole season. And Liverpool's transfer scheme just seems to be coming up big again, and he's capable of replacing the likes of Mane and probably Salah, and he's still young, and he's still needs nurturing, of course, but I think he's been absolutely brilliant. And you can just see that even when he comes off the bench, teams are worried. Defenders hate playing against him, and he can turn you inside out with ease.
Yeah, mate, I agree. Not 100%. I do think he lacks a little bit of end product. I know those stats are really good, just over a goal every 2 games, or a goal contribution every 2 games. But yeah, for me, I do think he lacks a little bit of end product. I do think he is probably one of the best dribblers, however, in the Premier League right now. And like you said, with Liverpool's transfer strategy, and, there's been a lot of talk this year about Mo Salah potentially not renewing a contract with Liverpool because they don't want to pay him the money. And I'm not really surprised, because when they can sign players like this kind of for prices which are under their valuation in reality, they don't need to pay the highest price on the wage bill, because they can always use their scouting network. And I think he's really improved Liverpool. Like I said, I thought, City might have slipped up not going out and buying the striker in the January transfer window to come in right now. Yes, they signed Alvarez, but he's not coming in now until the summer. But I thought Liverpool did the right thing going for Luis Diaz. Could have been something which really helped them in going for the title. Yes, they slipped up as of late, but I think what he's added is that extra strength. And you look across this Liverpool team now, and I think they do lack in that midfield area still quite a bit, but compared to the Liverpool team that won the title a couple of years ago, this team just has so much more depth and quality off the bench, with the likes of Jota, Diaz, Firmino, Salah, Mane. And, I'm pretty sure they're probably going to lose one of Salah, Mane or Firmino in the upcoming transfer window. But I have no doubt in them replacing them with a quality player. For me, Luis Diaz isn't my transfer of the season, but he's certainly up there, especially for January transfer signing. For me, my transfer of the season is Odegaard, which is kind of a cheap one, because he came in last year on loan, but they signed him on a permanent this season, and I think he's been absolutely brilliant. I've really found it hard to actually pick my transfer of the season, just because I think there's been quite a few good ones which have just gone under the radar. And for me, it was up there. It was between Odegaard and Jose Sarr. I think Jose Sar's been a brilliant replacement at Wolves. I think he could have easily gotten the team. I think other players I was looking at was like Mark Cucurella for Brighton, and I was also looking at Dan Burn at Newcastle, who I think's fitted in perfectly on Tyneside. But for me, I think Odegaard's just been brilliant in the Arsenal shirt. I think he's perfect for what they're looking at in that number 10. Not necessarily someone who's going to have that goal contribution every single game, but someone who just keeps the game flowing for him. And I think he's been, as good as they could have hoped for. Yes, he doesn't have the greatest stats on paper in terms of, goals and assists, but for me, he passes the eye test for flying colours.
I quite like this. It's a quite a different transfer. I didn't actually think about it. And yeah, 23 years of age, I think he's been quite influential in the Arsenal side. And I think the majority of things go through him. He obviously takes free kicks. He's quite good at set pieces. So I do like this as an outside shout for the transfer of the season. And I think he's probably been one of Arsenal's main players, and this when they win games, I think a lot of it is down to him. But yeah, I do quite like this.
Yeah. For me, it just makes me think of high school where there was that meme of the kid on the computer sticking his thumb up, and it was like, you're in school, Martin Odegaard's just signed for Real Madrid at the age of, what was he, 15 or something like that, and we was in, year 10. But yeah, man, I think he's been fantastic for him, and I think in terms of a signing, the price was good. I think he's only going to get better as he, becomes more adept at the Premier League. I think he kind of reminds me, not completely one-to-one, but he kind of reminds me of Eriksen in terms of the way he plays. He's not necessarily the most physical player, but he knows how to navigate the pitch, and his IQ's obviously quite high. We'll move on to your young player of the season, Rod.
I think Trent Alexander-Arnold, once again this year, he has been phenomenal. At 23 years of age, for me, he can play pretty much anywhere on the pitch, and 12 assists from right back, 2 goals, and obviously they've kept numerous clean sheets. I think he's just been fantastic again, and he's shown this for 3-4 years now, and lots of people say he can't defend. I think that's a poor opinion. I think we've seen that he can. It's not his strongest suit, of course it's not, but the system that Liverpool play is the fullbacks they're huge in the way they attack, and I think he's just been absolutely phenomenal. And at 23 years of age, he's won numerous accolades already, and especially this year he's won 2 more, and he can potentially win a further 2. I think he's just been incredible this year, and he's only going to get better, but I'm not sure how much better, because he's just been incredible again this year.
Yeah, mate, and I think you made a good point about them, the way the Liverpool system works, about them going forward, and a lot of people talk about his defending ability, but you got to also remember the fact that they are going so forward does leave the fullbacks exposed in the Liverpool system. I think you've seen that Robertson is probably the better defensively of the two, and is exposed less often, I guess you could say, but I don't think Trent's a bad defender at all, and I think the consistency he's shown now is something which is really, insane, because for 1 or 2 seasons, yeah, that's cool. But for the fact that he's been doing it for 3 or 4 now, he's proven he's probably the best right back in the world football at this moment in time. I do find it interesting with Reece James, because his numbers are crazy this year as well. But, he's kind of had a season where he's been riddled with injuries and stuff like that. But for England to have 2 such good right backs, it's going to be crazy to see, what Southgate can do. And is he going to maybe move Reece James to play right centre back of a 3, or is he maybe even going to play James on left wing back and Trent on the right? It's just crazy the options England have, and Trent has just been phenomenal. He's not my young player of the season. We've gone for different in every category, to be fair, Ron. I've gone with Declan Rice. For me, I think there was quite a few shouts. I think Trent, obviously, I thought for what it's worth, Conor Gallagher could have been up there because of how much influence he's had in that Crystal Palace team. It's just hard to pick one player. For me, it's got to be Declan Rice. He's shown improvement year on year. And for someone who doubted him at first, he's proven me wrong. I think he's brilliant in every area of that midfield now. He can play that holding role, but he can also play as that 8. For me, the most, important thing is that he's developed his game going forward. He's not necessarily going to score the most amount of goals or anything like that, but the way he can drive with the ball, is such an asset to have in your team. And for me, Declan Rice has been doing that now for the past 2 years, and he's been improving on it. His defensive game is, he's very tenacious in the midfield, and I think, if he's not gone in this transfer window, I'll be really surprised, because I think he's such a top talent, and I think he'd get into any of the top six teams in the Premier League.
Yeah, I have a similar opinion. He's 23 years of age as well. Played over 150 games for West Ham already. I think he's been fantastic. He reminds me of a proper old school midfielder who'll go into the tackles, but he can also drive with it. And I'm of similar opinion of you. I think he could easily go into any of the top six sides. Just the way he carries himself as well, and he seems like a nice guy. And yeah, I think West Ham have a right player on their hands. I think they value him at around 100 million, which obviously he means so much to their side and the way they operate with obviously him and Souček looking after the defence. But yeah, I think he's been phenomenal this year, and he's got 28 caps for England at the age of 23, which is also very impressive already.
Yeah, and for me, like, I know the 100 million sounds a bit crazy, but when you think about some of the players who are going for similar value, you look at the Harry Maguires and Jack Grealish and Lukaku, it doesn't sound that crazy. And maybe just because those players have flopped, it's not necessarily right. But for me, if you are a City or a Liverpool, I would be, going, look, we don't have to make that many improvements. We should be pushing for one big player. And I think Declan Rice could definitely be that. I think for other teams where you look at Manchester United and even maybe a Chelsea, I know Chelsea have got their problems at the moment, but I think they need to look at more areas to improve, and probably couldn't really justify spending 100 million on one player. But it is interesting, and for me, definitely a player to hold hopes on if you are an England fan going forward. Rod, let's get into your player of the season. I was actually surprised you went with this one.
So my logic behind this is, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. And for me, obviously, I think since the Africa Cup of Nations, he has been off the boil a bit, and I can see why people go for other options. And obviously, you've gone for someone different. But I think that this year and every year, he just puts up some ridiculous numbers. And I get this was most of them were earlier on in the season, but he can change the game in literally a blink of an eye. And he's a fantastic player. And he came to Liverpool a few years ago. He needed a lot of nurturing, and he probably, I mean, obviously he's getting on now, but I think the numbers just speak for themselves. And he is a crazy, crazy player. And I think at this point of the season, he's played a lot of games, and obviously he's getting older and he needs a rest. He's injured now. I think that could be down to exhaustion, but I think he's been crazy. And for me, he's settled player of the season just after Christmas.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from that. Yes, the numbers are crazy. Yeah, Mo Salah, you can definitely tell I'm not a Liverpool fan, because none of my players are Liverpool players. But Rod, I'm really surprised that you actually went with three Liverpool players: Luis Diaz for signing, young player Trent, and player of the year Mo Salah. But I think it does just speak volumes about how good this Liverpool side is, and the fact that they're coming short is crazy. But yeah, Mo Salah this year, like you said, he was the perfect fantasy captain for start of the season until January. I think the fact that he had to go to AFCON as well kind of interrupted his spell in the Premier League, and the amount of games he's played is just fucking ridiculous in total when you look at the Champions League games and cup games as well. I think you make a good point about the fact that he has been overplayed. It kind of reminds me of Rooney, towards the end where he's just not the player. But for Mo Salah, it's in like one season. Like Rooney, it's like Salah's played too much and he just needs a break now. And it'd be interesting to see, if he does stay at Liverpool next year, how can he rejuvenate himself and maybe push for a whole year. Obviously, he won't be playing in a World Cup, so he'll get a good rest if that's the case.
I do think though, for the amount of games he's played this year, it's understandable why he's becoming exhausted, and he's just an incredible athlete.
Yes, he is. Aren't all the Liverpool players? But
No.
yeah, I'll go with my player of the season, and it was a tough one for me. I think there was three players it could have gone to. I think it could have gone to Salah, KDB, but I felt like the problem with Salah and KDB is that they've had good half seasons. I think KDB from January onwards been superb, and I think Salah's been superb from the start of the season up until January, February time. But for me, I'm gonna go with Son Heung-min. For me, well, it sounded wrong when I said it then. I'm going to go with Heung-min Son. Because for me, I think he's been phenomenal. I think he's been playing in a team which is far less superior to the Liverpool and City team. I also think the fact that he started the season in a really poor Spurs team under Nuno. Since Conte's come in, he's been brilliant, but I thought he's brilliant before that as well. He's been Spurs' only really consistent player throughout the entire season. In terms of his ability to score goals, his XG is way below the amount of goals that he's scoring. For me, I think he's phenomenal, and I honestly think he is probably one of the best players in the world, and he doesn't get the recognition of that because of the fact he plays for Spurs. I know a lot of people don't really like his attitude at times, but for me, if I could sign one player right now, if I was one of the big boys, it would be Son. I know a lot of people talking about the Haalands and the Mbappes, but for me, I think Son's insane. Yes, these guys have probably higher ceilings and futures, but right now at this moment in time in world football, I think Son is right up there, and he's my Premier League player of the season.
So I like this. I think, Son, he doesn't get the recognition he deserves. I think you're completely right. Due to the side he plays in, he's obviously 29. He signed, I think, a 4-year contract extension last year for Spurs. So he'll probably be there to the end of his career. And he's put up some silly numbers this year, to be completely honest. And he is chasing that golden boot. 1 goal behind Salah. Obviously, Salah won't be playing tonight, so they've got 1 game each. I wouldn't be surprised if Son does overtake him due to him playing Norwich on the last day of the season. And him and Kane, just their innate relationship is absolutely brilliant, and it's so strong. And for me, just Son, he isn't the most clinical of finishers. I think he needs a few chances. I think we saw that on the weekend against Burnley. We've seen it throughout the season, but 21 goals is fantastic in a Spurs side which isn't as strong as Liverpool or Manchester City. So I do like this. I do like your choice for player of the season.
Yeah, for me, another thing with Son is how adaptable he is. I think he can play in a lot of systems as well. I think you could see him playing through the middle and do, fine. I think he can play off the right or the left. And I think the fact that he's got the ability to dribble with the ball, go past players, he can go in behind on the run, which we see so many times with, Kane passing the ball through to him, but he can also go from outside the box. He can shoot from distance and score goals. We've seen it in the past, and I think he's one of the most complete forwards in the Premier League right now, and what a player. Rod, it brings us towards the end of the video, and we go to your Premier League team of the season, as I accidentally skipped to mine for a second. But yeah, Rod, talk us through your team of the season and reasons for why you picked your players, I guess.
So I'll sort of start with the manager. I think it was a difficult one. I've got something against Manchester City, so I couldn't really put my bias to the side in terms of their manager, but obviously I've included quite a few of their players. Klopp, he's doing it differently this year. I mean, 2 trophies, both on penalties though, but he's
against the same team.
Yeah, precisely. He's doing it differently, and I think he's fantastic. I do find him at times dislikable in terms of the way how he comes out in press conferences, etc. He does moan a lot, but if you're a Liverpool fan, I can see why you adore him, because he adores the city, he adores the club. And then it moves off team of the season. Sorry, Alisson in goal. He does have the most clean sheets this year, and at times, obviously, he's made mistakes, but all the top keepers do. But he does make up for those mistakes with some big saves. Trent, obviously I mentioned it earlier on in this young player of the season. He's put up some ridiculous numbers and he's been fantastic. Moves us to left back. Left back was a tough one. It was between, obviously Cancelo has mainly played left back this year, or Robertson. But I put Robertson there. I think he's, like we mentioned earlier, he's also put some ridiculous numbers up. Defensively, he's also, I find him quite stellar. Van Dijk, wasn't too sure how he's going to come back from his injury. I thought obviously a huge injury, it can either make or break a player. They either bounce back, and for me, he's a colossal defender. Forwards hate coming against him, and you think you've got a few yards on him, and they'll just be sprinting behind you. And his strength and stature is phenomenal. And Laporte, I think it was him or Diaz. I think obviously you've gone for Diaz, which we'll get on to. But Laporte, left-sided centre back. Last year we didn't really see him that often, but this year he's been fantastic. This year he's come in with a few goals, and defensively he's made some huge blocks. And City and Liverpool defenders, I think this year have been ridiculous. I've gone with Rodri in the holding role. I think it was between him or Fabinho. I think they've done a ridiculous job this year, and Rodri's so influential in the way City play. He can pass. He's got a decent passing range. He looks after that defence, although it doesn't need much looking after. So I think he's been ridiculous. Obviously, you had Declan Rice for your young player this season, like we mentioned earlier. His passing ability is brilliant. He can drive up the pitch with it, and he's got a strong stature about him, and he's a colossal midfielder, in my opinion. Proper good old school midfielder. KDB, it was between him or Mount for me. I think Mount's quite gone under the radar this year. I think he's been very good, and he's put up some good numbers. But I've had to go with KDB as of late because obviously he got 4 against Wolves. He's been ridiculous in the Champions League. And for me, there's always been that debate of Bruno or KDB in the last few years. And I think KDB has shown that he is the more complete player. I think he's been brilliant this year. But
I
more
think
so,
he's pulled it out of sight this year. Like, there's no comparison.
yeah. So obviously that moves us on to the front three, and I had to go for my mate up front. I think he's put himself definitely in the running for the England side, and the only reason if he doesn't make it is because Southgate has a bias towards the top 4, top 5 clubs, and we saw it last year with only just including Grealish late on. I think Bowen, he's put up some silly numbers this year, and I think he's improved his finishing, and his work rate is just phenomenal. He'll always help the fullback. And that obviously moves us on to Son and Salah, like we mentioned earlier. I mean, they were our player of the seasons, and they've put some silly numbers up this year. The goal contributions are huge, and they're pivotal to the sides they play for. And I think you'd be silly not to include them in your team of the seasons, everyone out there, because they've been huge for their clubs this year.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I completely agree, mate. Yeah, it's hard to put a finger on what's wrong with your team, I guess. For me, I mean, might as well just go straight on to mine, I guess, because then we could talk about the comparisons. But for me, manager of the season, I can't give it to Klopp. I think there's only one man, and his name is Eddie Howe. For me, I don't understand how he's not being given this award already. Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola, yes, amazing managers. They've done what they've done before. But this man did the impossible. I think Newcastle didn't have a win at Christmas, right?
I don't think they did.
And he saved them. And you look at that Newcastle squad from the one where he was looking at with Bruce, and they haven't even got assets to sell. And you look at the squad now, players that Bruce wasn't getting performances out of, and now you look at the squad and you're like, man, these are some decent players. You look at John Joe Shelby, he's put in a shift for him. Some of the signings he's made, a lot of people are going to go, oh, they spent all this money. But a lot of the players they bought, they priced. Wow, they paid way too much for some of the players they bought, and some of the players they bought, a lot of people wouldn't have wanted anyway. I think you look at Dan Burn, and for me, he was one of the players I was actually looking to bring into my starting 11. But for me, he's done an amazing job, and I did hear rumours about potentially Mourinho coming in, but I think it'd be unjustified to not give him a chance next year. What a guy. For me in goal, Jose Sa. Ain't nobody like Jose, mate. This guy's stats this season are phenomenal. The expected goals against compared to what it is just crazy. I think I was watching a video earlier and someone's talking about it that, he should have, he saved Wolves on total something like 11 goals, which is just crazy. I think he's up there with the top saves, not far off the amount of clean sheets either. what a goalkeeper and what a replacement for Rui Patricio, who seemed to be such a solid goalkeeper for Wolves. Right back, I had to go with Trent. For me, honestly, right, I found it hard to not put Reece James in this team, but I just couldn't find a place for him. If I could have maybe took out one of my centre backs and just chucked him in there, but that probably wouldn't have been right. For me, Trent's been amazing. I do think Reece James, if he would have had a injury-free season and probably playing in a bit of a better Chelsea squad, he could have pushed him. But yeah, phenomenal. Phenomenal. Van Dijk, what can you say? That he came back from that injury like it was nothing, and he looks better than he even did before. I think the more Liverpool strengthen, the more it's kind of standing out just how good he is, just because he's no matter who you put next to him, Kanate's look getting good next to him, and Matt arguably could have been the second centre back in this team because of how good he's been this season alongside Van Dijk. But I did go with Diaz. I think other options you could have looked at were like someone like a Rudiger or Laporte, like you said. But for me, when Diaz has played, and he hasn't played as often as Laporte, but for me, when he has played, he has been the better of the two, in my opinion. For me, it's crazy you haven't got João Cancelo in there, Rod. The man's done so much for you this year in fantasy. For me, one of the best fullbacks in world football. Such a complete player as well. You think he could play in midfield as well. He's so good. And it's crazy to think that he's only something like 27 now, I think. And Juventus got rid of him a while back and brought in Danilo, which is crazy. But Declan Rice at holding midfield for me. Like I said, young player of the season earlier. I went with KDB. I think, especially since the new year, the man's looked crazy. 4 goals the other night, and, he's been pivotal for Manchester City's consistent performances. I went with Mason Mount, like you said. Stats really are being overlooked. I think he's got double figures in goals and assists. And I could be wrong on that though, but he's close to that. If not, he's been crazy for me, and he's just not getting the credit he deserves just because he's playing in a Chelsea squad which was expected to potentially push for the Champions League, but they've just been stuck in third all season. Mo Salah, Heung-min Son, nothing left to say about them really. Just two top quality players who have been, I guess you could say with Salah, a little bit inconsistent in terms of his form, but I think even though he hasn't been playing to his best of his ability, he's still been making an impact for Liverpool. And for Son, so consistent all year round. I had to go with Ronaldo up top. It was hard for me to kind of pick a striker. I was thinking about potentially putting another winger in there, but I'm going to go with Ronaldo, man. I think the amount of goals he scored is, still really good, considering he's been playing in one of the worst United side I've ever seen in my life. And to be honest, it's kind of crazy to think, where would United be if he wouldn't have been there? We wouldn't have reached the knockout stages of the Champions League. Not that it meant much. And, for me, I think we could have actually been something like 10th in the Prem because, some of the hat-tricks he scored. You look at Norwich as well, hat-trick, which, single-handedly won the game. Just crazy for me, Rod. So I guess our differences are, Ronaldo, Bowen, and Rodri, Mount, Cancelo, Robertson, and Diaz, Laporte, Jose Sarr, and Alisson. But for me, I think we're kind of along the same lines. And, like you said, even when you was picking your team, you kind of picked players who I was already going to talk about in my team because you knew how close they were to getting into your team, in your opinion. And, I think we've got 2 solid squads in my opinion. If I can say opinion any more times, it might be a record. But what are your thoughts, Rod?
To be honest, mate, I can't disagree with any of the players you've got in there. I think Jose Sarr, he's put some ridiculous underlying stats up this year, and he has been pivotal on Wolves' clean sheets because on paper, I think Wolves have an okay defensive back line, but yeah, his save ratio, the amount is absolutely crazy. And I was watching, obviously, the Newcastle performance last night, so the last home game for them, and yeah, to be honest, I can see why you've gone Eddie Howe. He's done wonders at the club. I mean, he spent a lot of money on Chris Wood, not really done anything. It just gives me Dominic Solanke vibes. But he's brought down Burnham, Matt Target, Bruno Guimaraes, Trippier, and he's made Joel Linton into their player of the season. He got voted it, I think, the other night. So he's nurtured players, and to be honest, I didn't I didn't really rate it when he came in. I was like, I don't think he'll do anything, but he has impressed me, and he's done really well. And I think obviously you went for Diaz, I went for Laporte. I think it could have been either or. I could even throw Matip in there.
Yeah,
Cancelo,
Rudiger.
yeah, I can't disagree with Cancelo either. It was between him or Robertson for me also. And obviously I mentioned Mount, yeah. And I think you made a very good point with Ronaldo. If he wasn't at United, I dread to think where he'd be. He's saved you a lot of times in a lot of competitions. And I think form is temporary, class is permanent. He's been brilliant. And well, I think he'll probably be there next year. I think he's got one more year on his contract, and he's also put up some crazy numbers this year, and he's turned up in the big games. And when you need players to stand up and be counted, I think he's definitely done that. So, to be honest, mate, there's no one in your team I could disagree with at all. I think it's a very solid team, and I think on paper we've got two solid teams and two solid managers, and it will be interesting to see what the last game of the season brings us.
Yeah, man, I can't wait. Obviously, we're gonna be going out for that probably. Go play some poker and then get on the lash for the games. Should be fun. But if you have made it this far in the video, guys, let us know down below in the comments. You know, what is your starting 11? Try and keep it in a 4-3-3 formation, just so I think 4-3-3 is probably the most popular formation, so that's why we do it like that. And let us know if you agree with our awards or not. You know, let us know who you had for flop, young player, player of the season, and there was one more, wasn't there? Transfer of the season. But yeah, guys, if you have enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content, and we'll see you later. Peace.